Um, well, thank you. First of all, thank you for having us with you today. I'm very delighted to be able to share with you this work in progress that I've been working on with Fabienne Munch and Katharina, who are the two co-curator of an exhibition we've been working on for a very long time now, and which will be opening at the end of November this coming fall. So I'm Louise Pelletier. I'm the director of the Design Center in Montreal. And so this exhibition that we're going to tell you about explores the pivotal role of women designers in the transformation of textile design over the past century, from craft to a design discipline in its own right, and its recognition into the realm of art. It's a project that has evolved over the years, but that comes from this deep desire to show more explicitly the work of women, and textile seemed to be the most appropriate medium to address some of the crucial issues. And in fact, as you will see in our tightly woven presentation, textile poetics shaped each dimension of this exhibition that we're working on, from concept to the choice of artifact, the exchange among ourselves, our team, and with the designer and artist, and all the way to the exchanges we're now choreographing for the audience. So together we're developing this textile choreography, creating a rhythmic structure that will guide the viewer's gaze and step through the 400 square meter space of the gallery. So I think it's useful to make a note that, contrary to art galleries, the mandate of the Design Center is to showcase concepts and artifacts that relate to various disciplines of design, from product design to architecture, from graphic design to fashion. And my personal ambition and desire as director of the center was, as I said, to give a greater place and visibility to the work of women. I've been teaching for many, many years now, and a question that often come up is that why is there so few women in the history of design? As some other people have mentioned earlier today, and Irene was just mentioning the work of Annie Albers. And so this is a very important historical turning point when women started being admitted in schools of design, like at the Bauhaus, and were promptly directed towards the bidimensional arts, printing, but also weaving. With this desire to show the work of women, I suggested to Fabienne and Katharina to bring together exceptional work by contemporary women to show this work that addresses crucial issues today. So we invited 20 women designers from 4 continents and 12 countries to present their work in this exhibition. A word on the venue, which is located in this design pavilion, so in the School of Design. It's a very modernist building designed by Romanian architect Dan Hangenu, and it has its own language of steel and glass, embracing a dialogue with natural light, a precious commodity in Canadian winters, and a symbolic openness towards the outside. So, in fact, some of the work that we selected interact directly with the architecture of the building. And of course, in a 15 minute presentation, we won't have time to mention too many of them, but as an example, the work of Pauline van Doggen, for example, Suntex, is a solar textile that combines, that becomes a second skin for existing building, combining solar shading properties with solar harvesting. It will be placed in front of a window in the gallery to allow the interactive installation to filter sunlight. So Suntex is a textile created by weaving organic photovoltaic solar cells, which are made from polymers together with recycled polymer yarn, which is really a groundbreaking approach to textile and environmental concerns.
Thank you, Louise. So I am Fabienne Munch. I wanted to say a word on the genesis of the project. Conceiving this exhibition on women textile designers somehow defeated a traditional leadership approach to curation. We adopted a situational leadership process. First, because the history of textile offers a multi-dimensional, plurisensorial reading of our societies around the world, which entails a variety of expressions of shapes and supports. So this invokes different fields of scholarship and cultural acumen. Second, this is an exhibition on women, curated by women, women with complementary skills and backgrounds in architecture, artistry, industrial design, fashion design. So our approach as co-curator was grounded in co-designing the exhibition under a distributed leadership, or as I like to call a situational leadership model, as was coined by Hersey and Blanchard. And what does that mean? Namely, it means that leadership styles changed and adapted depending on the factors that impacted the environment and the profile of the actors. So along this curatorial process stage, leadership changed hands and was woven into the different dimension of this decision process. At the curator's level, at the designers, guests level, this women designer that will be part of the exhibition are leaders in their own field in many countries in the world. At the grant institution and foundation level, at the influencers level, and even in the grant and subvention writing level. So we had many different dimensions in the process. And lastly, this situational leadership process invited conversations to focus on the who, what, and how, instead of the why. Yes, we made curatorial choices that required some justifications, but these justifications were not based on personal preferences. The way the choices occurred was more on a bird's eye view over the whole project, even though its evolving material expression was still forming in our individual heads. And we wanted that each curator's strength and complementary expertise would be celebrated during this situational leadership process. So now that you know how we have operated as women co-curator, I will pass the hand to Katharina, who will present our concept.
Thank you so much. So yes, I'm Katharina Sand, and many of today's talks mention the textile practices. how textiles are spun and spooled and woven and worn. So practices of makers and of wearers. Textiles really hum with these gestures and the stories. And they're deeply tied to this poetry of movement and to migration of power, of people, and of knowledge. So fabric inherently encourages multidirectional readings and therefore multidirectional and nonlinear exhibitions. Women have played a very significant part, women and their hands and their imagination and their sweat, in this form of communication, which, as we saw in some of the talks today, predates the written word and is deeply entangled in socioeconomic dynamics of its own. And our case study really documents this very splendidly nonlinear process that we engaged in all together. It's the development of our exhibition of women designers, which started with discussions between Fabienne and Louise many years ago, and I joined 2 years ago. And early 2021, Fabienne came up with this concept. So here we have these circular elements, which represent the central 4 themes that we're working with. And they stand and refer to the circular gestures of spinning yarn, but also the circularity in design processes and manufacturing processes. And as Dalila mentioned earlier this morning, there's an abundance of circular shapes in women's work. She was citing Lucy Lifford, and we actually had that experience as we were gathering the different items. We kept finding repetitions of circles as well in the work. So the 4 themes explore the impact and contribution of women designers on and upon textile design through experimentation, emotion, tradition, and innovation, and historical context and historical breakthroughs. And these became our narrative threads, which led us through the process. But yet each design individually impacted the narrative. So as we'll see from the next slide, each design has its own sensory elements. Textiles are always felt, even when they're seen. And their visual hapticity, the roughness or smoothness, their geometric structures, they all engage viewers or readers on a visceral and emotional level. And they make people draw on their personal memories and their experiences of touch. Textiles also make their presence felt through their sense, as we've heard in a couple of the talks today, through the rustle or the way they muffle out sounds. They can also make their presence felt through the way they can change the temperature of a room or its atmosphere, through the hues or the shadows that they create, and also through their meanings.
Thank you, Katharina. I mentioned in the beginning that the exhibition brings together the work of women designers. There are some exceptions to the rule, and one of them is the work of Mohawk artist Clara Hemlock. In her talk this morning, Jessica mentioned the oppression in the manufacturing of textile. And Clara also addresses, through the use of medium and the subject matter in her work, a politically engaged discourse. When we first reached out to Carla, we had in mind this quilt, Turtle Island Unraveling, from the Nerman Museum's collection. What is interesting is that the turtle is a central female mythological figure in indigenous cosmology, and Turtle Island is the name given to North America by many indigenous people. Using the imagery of the turtle combined with the embroidery of a radically distinct structure, that of a drilling rig or an oil derrick in the center, if you look at the center of the turtle here, Carla addresses the environmental impact of oil and gas industry through the practice of fracking. As the art historian Jennifer McLennan has pointed out, hemlock's quilt can be seen simply as bed coverings with decorative representation of animal and plants, or they may be read as political statements regarding environmental justice and violence against Indigenous women. She writes, Hemlock questions the wisdom of practices such as fracking, reminding her viewers that humans bear the responsibility to be the Earth's caretaker. She superimposes a web across the cosmic turtle's back to remind us of the fragile web of life that humans in general and Iroquois women in particular are entrusted with protecting. As their artistry evolved, Indigenous artists developed a system of double coding, producing imagery that seems benign and innocuous to non-native viewers, but conveys potent cultural and political messages to other Native Americans. The technique preserves Native imagery, histories, and stories that may not otherwise have survived colonization, fostering a sense of shared identity among Indigenous people. After our conversation, Carla has kindly offered to create a new experimental work for the exhibition entitled Water. And we'll have to wait the exhibition to have more detail. To you, Katharina.
Thank you. So as the exhibition invites multiple interpretations and works with multiple dimensions, one of the most challenging aspects has been to communicate context. How do we intertwine the past, the present, and the future of textiles? How do we entangle as many viewpoints as possible? We were, of course, also limited by the size of the space, so we had to make choices. But a strictly chronological narrative just was out of the question for us. And also the sharing and interlacing of knowledge has been so central in our work that we decided that we would share our knowledge with people so that they could explore it at their own pace by sharing all our references. So we integrated a referential library, consultable library within the project as well. And we also invited the UQAM art history professor who specialized in feminist art history, Christina Contandropoulos, for the historical section. And she had a great suggestion to expand the historical part to printed matter. So not just books and texts, but also fabric patterns, photographic prints of textile processes, manufacturing processes, but also the designers and designs. And thereby it interweaves both the creative intentions and also textile processes that are both contemporary, but also historical. And we also decided to expand the exhibitions through other words. So there will be a symposium as well, a publication, a podcast, social media strategy, which includes, of course, not just text, but also hypertext. So again, interweaving us with other projects. And there is also an example of something that happened to us through this process of searching. Of course, working with more words led us to new discoveries and new readings as well. And Louise has a great example, which she will describe for that.
Yeah, Katharina, I think I'm afraid we're already running overtime. So maybe we'll go straight to the conclusion, and I can go back to the Annie Albert's example if there is time in the discussion afterwards.
Yes.
Oh, Fabienne, sorry.
Well, that's okay. So yes, last slide. In conclusion, woven, knitted, unraveled threads encourage both multi-directional readings as mentioned Katharina, and exhibition making as our outcome. It was and still is, we're still working on it, process influenced by the initial concept that you know, have seen, influenced by human dimensions, spatial dimension, sensory dimension, symbolic dimension, also some unexpected, some interrelation between the works, between us, and the entanglement between those texts and textiles. Much like Ingold's description of the textility of weaving a basket as a process shaped all along by different elements, by each fiber, this is the process that we followed all along the way. Thank you for having us. This exciting introduction to textility and poetry. We hope you can join us in Montreal on November 29th for the grand opening and for the symposium to discuss this further.